Welcome to Scéalta. My name is Joe Austin. This is a Scéalta special, which we do periodically through the year. And my guest today, and I'm delighted it's my guest today, is Mary Lou McDonald, Leader of Sinn Féin. So thank you for agreeing to have a conversation. And I have to say, taking time out of your diary is not just something that you do lately. So we really appreciate you doing that. And I know your diary is chock-a-blocked, and I know you have several diaries that are chock-a-blocked. So thank you. And we're going to talk for about an hour about you. And occasionally you'll hear my voice, I suspect. But it's really that people kind of get a sense of you. A columnist who shall remain nameless, but quite important because they're a columnist, described you as a tyrant and said that the recent decisions that you took were harsh, and they were taken, without any consideration. And I have to say, the same person a few months ago now to be accurate, said that you were a puppet, a stooge. You were directed by other people. You didn't have a mind of your own, and that you done what you were told. So I suspect you're neither, by the way, and I don't even think that diplomatically you could say you're in between. So I suspect that none of those things are the case. And the media, I suppose, portrays the Mary Lou that they have in their heads rather than who actually exists. So for our viewers, tell us a wee bit about yourself, Mary Lou.
Well, thanks for that. I didn't see that column, and I didn't read those remarks. I would defend my position and say I'm certainly not a tyrant, although my kids might disagree from time to time. And I'm certainly no puppet. So I think, Joe, one of the things to say, and I think this applies to every person who is in the public eye, that people can have perceptions of you or draw a picture of you, paint a picture of you, which may or may not tally with the reality. And as regards being a tyrant or a puppet whose strings are pulled, neither of those are true. What is true to say is that I am, I suppose, a fairly direct, single-minded. I can be very, resolute, particularly when I commit to something that I believe to be right. I'll do the hard yards, and I will argue the toss. And when a decision needs to be taken, I'll take the decision. But I also am very keenly a team player, and I believe in the benefit and the wisdom of the collective. And so I try to live my political life and my life in activism in that kind of way. I'm a Dubliner, so you know what we're like. I mean, not alone are we All-Ireland, supreme All-Ireland footballing champions. We covet the hurling title as well. I come from this city that I'm very proud of. I live on the north side, even though I am a south sider. So I sought refuge north of the Liffey. My husband's a north sider. And I have teenage children. They're not children now, they're young adults. And you see, outside of politics, I'm a very regular person. Like I'm mammy, and I try to be a good friend, and I like simple things in life, like good company. I like a bit of crack. I have a good sense of humor. I like walks. I like open fires. So I don't have a kind of dramatic backdrop, to outside of my political life. Like I don't go bungee jumping or scaling Mount Everest or any of those things. I've always been too busy, I suppose, raising my family and just keeping the show on the road like lots of other people. My mother's from Tip, so I still have a very strong connection with South Tipperary. And I suppose in my political formation, it has been my mother's view of the world and my grandmother and that connection, which was very, very significant in how I see things, and certainly in my sense of myself as an Irish Republican woman. But I grew up in Dublin, and I had what I think was a happy childhood, not without its challenges, no different to any other family. But I had the very great privilege, Joe, of a very good education. And of course, education should never be a privilege. Access to education for every citizen is one of the fundamentals of a really rich and life of opportunity. We're not there yet on the island of Ireland in making that a reality, but I was lucky. My mother, being a country woman, put a huge stock on education. So all of us are very well educated. So sometimes the other thing, by the way, that people say about me is, my God, how is she a Sinn Féiner? Like, she's posh. Do you not remember that? That used to be the storyline around me for years and years. Even though I want to reassure you, dear Joe, I am not posh in the slightest, but I am a Southside Dubliner, and I'm fortunate enough to have a very good education, and that's what I want for my own children and for everyone else. So that's who I am. Neither tyrant nor puppet, just me, Dublin woman, Irish Republican woman, and resolutely proud of both.
You haven't probably counted this, but since I asked you who is Mary Lou, you've said Dublin 5 times. So clearly.
I need to finish the 6th time.
Well, we'll get it in. Well, clearly, you're very proud of the city. You're very proud of what makes Dublin the great city, I have to say that it is, and the great people who they are. And your kind of eyes dance when you say Dublin. It's like as if someone has hit an extra light bulb. And you are very, very measured. And you know, I think the difficulty with the media is the media can't get their label to fit you. So that's why they keep changing it. That's why you're a posh woman. That's why you're a harsh woman, and all that nonsense. And I, just get it out of the road, because it is nonsense. Last year we nearly lost you. You had COVID, and you were pretty bad. I think many of us didn't think that you would come back as quickly as you did, and I suspect you came back a wee bit too quickly. How frightening was that?
You know what? It was awful. Now, let me just, before I describe the experience, I just want to make this clear how conscious I am of how lucky I was, because I was sick, Joe, but I was not nearly as sick as lots and lots of other people. I wasn't hospitalized, much less in ICU. I mean, I managed to fight this virus off at home in the privacy of my own room. So that was lucky. And I'm conscious also of so many people who have lost loved ones to this terrible, terrible virus. And the heartbreak of losing someone at any time is just immense. But to this virus, and then in the context of COVID, where everything was so tense and frightening and restricted, even in terms of how you said your goodbyes. So I think it's important to say that before I recount my own experience. Because I was lucky. Yes, I was sick. I have been very fortunate in my life that I have never, before this experience, faced serious sickness. I mean, beyond sniffles and coughs and minor things. But this, absolutely hit me like a train. And it was, physically, it's a very, very vicious virus. So it hit every part of me. I mean, it hurt to think, it hurt to open my eyes, to speak. I mean, I was literally flattened for 2-3 weeks. And then at the end, I now know, as kind of in the post-viral phase of my sickness, I got pleurisy in one of my lungs. So that kind of drew it out again. So it was an absolutely awful experience. And anyone who incorrectly thinks that coronavirus is just some kind of flu, it's not a flu. This is a novel virus, and this is a really unforgiving, vicious virus that everybody wants to keep well clear of, and do everything you can to make sure that you can avoid it and that you don't get sick. But here is the most significant thing for me, was that what had happened was the coronavirus started as a story in China, if you recall. Yeah. And then it was in Italy. And then it actually, one of the first cases of this virus was confirmed in the school that my children go to. And so we were on lockdown much earlier because the school was closed down and there was terrible worry, not exactly panic, but not far off it. So we had been in shut down early since the very beginning of March. I didn't contract the virus through the children or the school or anything, but it was almost as though this virus was in China, in Italy, then it's in Cabra. And then when I got sick, it's in your house and it's in your body. So there was something psychological about the experience of being sick with this virus, because it was almost as though you personally were part of the story that was the headline news relentlessly in every news cycle, day in and day out. And that was, I will be honest with you, frightening. And I felt and feel an incredible personal sense of connection with everybody else who has been sick with this virus and everybody who has died from the virus, because I've been through that experience. And let me emphasize, I mean, I was lucky. What I went through, Joe, was mild by comparison to what others endured. So yeah, it was a bad experience. I'm delighted that I was back, and I'm myself again, more or less. So I'm lucky, and I only hope, and we don't really know, nobody knows. The doctors don't know the long-term effect or implications of this virus. So I can only hope and pray that that I'm back to myself, and that I'm good. But I generally enjoy good health. So yeah, here I am.
That brings me on to another question, and even those who wouldn't endorse your politics or Sinn Féin's politics would readily acknowledge your ability to hold your own, to be on your feet, to think, and to, whether it's in an interview, a conversation like this, or in the Dáil, or anywhere else. I seen you just after you had returned, and it was in the aftermath of a discussion where Sinn Féin was arguing additional resources for unemployed and people who were forced to use food banks, and people. And I don't know whether it was a result of, as you say, that immediate understanding of how this thing affects a family. I suspect it hits a family like, I mean, it just devastates a family in terms of your emotions and all that. But you were quite emotional about it. You were quite kind of, we need to be there with people fighting. Don't say we're all in this together. Let's prove it. And did you carry that personal experience? And it must have been a frightening, harrowing time for your family, who I have to say, in their defence, see little enough of you anyway. But it must have been a terrible fear for them that this thing is, as you say, it's dominating the news, every paper, it's killing people left, right, and centre, and my mommy's got it, and she's up the stairs. So
Yeah.
was all that rolled in? I don't know whether you recall the engagement you had with the media just after that debate in the Dáil. I know you've done so many, and it's part of all that. But was there a sense that, be in it together, but let's deal with it together rather than say it? Was there a sense of that?
Absolutely, and for my family, for my kids and my husband, yeah, it was a frightening experience, and they would say that very, very, very clearly. The other thing was, I was trying to keep it from my mother. So, and I of course I didn't succeed when I eventually told her. The other thing is, Joe, that I kind of went through the sickness I didn't get a positive diagnosis for about 17 or 18 days, a positive test back. So I fought this thing, and my own doctor said, Mary Lou, you have this, and just take comfort from the fact that your immunity, has mobilized, you're fighting this back. So, this is hard, but you're gonna get through it. But I didn't have a definite test until, 18 days, I think it was. And as I said, I didn't want it all over the media that I had this thing, and my mother hearing it, and you all of those things. So those were issues for me, but I'm really conscious that anybody who either gets sick from this virus, or people who've lost their jobs, people whose businesses are to the wall, people whose mental health, who are feeling really isolated or desperate or alone, or whose routines are just upended. And of course, above all else, people who have been bereaved in this through COVID or through other scenarios. This is a very, very human crisis. I mean, we talk about it as, you know, a medical crisis, a public health crisis, an economic crisis. And of course, COVID is all of those things. But when you boil it down to its essentials, this is a human crisis. And I think it is so important that, therefore, the system, you know, the government, those that make decisions are in lockstep with people on the ground who are carrying the can for all of this. And so I do remember the exchange, that particular exchange in terms of supports for people who had lost their jobs. The government down here was proposing to cut those supports, and they had plans to phase them out and so on, at a time where we were still on high alert and people were still out of work. You can't do that. I mean, that's wrong. And I have to say, if I can just say this, for my colleagues and comrades in the north and all across the island, through their GA clubs and residents groups and community groups and youth groups, who actually, you know, went out and reached out the hand of solidarity and help, you know, running for messages or prescriptions or making a phone call or, you know, dropping around, you know, a jar of jam or, you know, an apple tart or whatever to a neighbor. All of those, you know, those are the acts of real solidarity that you need, because this thing, we haven't seen the like of this in a century. This is very unnerving for people. And yes, Joe, I think I feel that very strong sense and obligation that you have that connection with people who, in many cases, were left in very quiet desperation and very unseen private grief and isolation and so on. And Irish people are great. People are just brilliant in terms of what they can do and how we can lift each other and carry each other through this crisis. But yeah, I still feel very emotional on that point. I suppose all the more so now as we're coming into Christmas.
Well, that's the only time, just for the record, that's the only time that I've seen you motivated, and I've seen you fired up, and I've seen you all the stuff that you're good at doing. But on that occasion, there was another odd kind of, and it was based on that experience. We are approaching a period of centenaries and remembrances and all of that. And over many years, I've heard you speaking, and I've heard you speaking in different settings, and I've heard you being interviewed, and I've heard you doing different stuff. And I've heard you having hostile interviews, and I've heard you having stupid interviews, and I've heard you having great interviews. I can't think of a single event where you had an opportunity to speak, where you didn't speak of reconciliation. You didn't speak, including the Belfast Easter commemoration you done a few years back. I can't think of a single case where you didn't make the point of reaching out, embracing, understanding differences, and all of that. And this period of commemorations, north and south. And of course, reaching out doesn't only apply to the north. I mean, we still have the scars of the Civil War or the counter-revolution, or depending on how you look at it. But in terms of that need to, or the ability to, is it still high on your agenda? Is it still something that you drive with the passion?
Yes, and for those of us who passionately believe that Irish unification, a reunified Ireland, is the best idea and the best prospect for all of our people. And I believe that. I also believe, Joe, that we are in our own time writing our own chapters now of history. And I believe that we will have a referendum on unity. I believe that we can win that referendum and win it well. And I believe, above all else, that we can actually construct a new Ireland, that we can build, that we can right the wrong of a century of partition and all of the damage that has been done. And the damage has been economic, it's been social, it's been cultural, it's been psychological. It has damaged and fractured the relationships that we most rely on for us to live our fullest lives individually and as communities. So for any of us that are committed to that project, and that's why I go to work every day, because I believe that we can do this together. And therefore, of course, reconciliation has to be at the heart of that. And I'm conscious, even in using that word, that for some people that sounds maybe like something very highfalutin or abstract or high level. I am talking very basically about people knowing each other, listening to each other, appreciating each other, acknowledging each other, acknowledging difference and not running away from it, acknowledging hurt and recognizing it in the other, and acknowledging above all else that we all bring something incredibly valuable, invaluable in fact, to the discussion around what will Ireland look like in a decade, in 2 decades. What does the reunified Ireland look like? How does it operate? And I have had what I regard as the great privilege of meeting people. It is the great privilege of this job, by the way, of being an elected person and being a political leader, is that you meet and have access to just the most extraordinary range of people and views and experiences that I don't think you would access possibly in any other walk of life. So I have had the privilege of meeting, talking to, listening to everyone from young people who have had no real direct experience of the conflict as it was, who see the world totally through different eyes than you, than I, than their parents or their grandparents. I've had the great privilege of sitting down with people who not alone knew conflict, but knew grievous loss through the actions of the IRA or any of the other combatant groups, loyalism, who have suffered at the hands of the British state and their policy of collusion, who suffered the degradation of not being wanted in a hostile state, and others who feel a very strong sense of allegiance to that very state. I have met that range of people, and I make a point of meeting people where they are, accepting where they are, without ever relinquishing or given any misunderstanding as to who I am and what I represent. And for me, that is the essence of the reconciliation project. We're not looking for retreat. We're not looking for surrender. We're not, and I don't think, nor should we ever ask somebody who is a Republican, a nationalist, a loyalist, or a unionist to abandon that sense of their identity. I think that's a fool's errand. The central point for me about reconciliation is acknowledgement, acceptance, and then appreciation. Actually, to have an appreciation of each other. And I'm very conscious, Joe, particularly in your part of the world, day in and day out, in ways that are considered small and unspectacular and that will never be reported by the columnists that you've talked about earlier, by many of them, that those acts of reconciliation are happening every day. Like, this isn't something that's going to be delivered by the great and the good, although the great and the good, I would hope, would lead constructively on this project. This is something that people ourselves on the ground, the grassroots, that's really where the action is going to happen. But yes, like, and you have noticed when I speak at different events, and particularly, I suppose, at our own events, at Republican events, I make a point of talking about this because as Republicans, we are the ones arguing for the new Ireland, for an end to partition. And I believe we have a particular capacity, but also a particular responsibility to demonstrate, as Tone said, that this is about Catholic, Protestant and dissenter. It's about every citizen in their own right, on their own terms, because everybody has their part to play in what is an incredibly exciting period in Irish history and Irish political life. Unbelievably exciting. If you listen to me, Hall Martin, and some of them down here and in the north, you hear, you know, the idea of reunification and kind of like threat, the language of threat and uncertainty and fear, and even the language of loss. That's completely to miss the point. The language of reunification is opportunity and progress and advancement and gain and win all round. And I think we need to very consciously focus our debate in that positive way and not give way to the naysayers who say, no, this cannot change. No, we can't achieve this. No, we can't do this together. We can. I absolutely believe that we can. And by the way, I believe that we will.
And I believe in you, and I believe that we will as well. But can I ask you, you know, reconciliation, which is all our responsibility. It's not the responsibility of any particular leadership. It's the responsibility of all men and women of goodwill. Not because it's the right thing to do or the smart thing to do. It's the only thing to do. But would you acknowledge that it can be frustrating? It can be one step forward and 4 steps back. And what do you say to people who, as you mentioned, that group of people on the ground who make contact and deal with other communities every day, and they deal with people of different different politics and no politics? When you get to that kind of, I'm sick doing this, what do you say to them then? Try again? Or what advice do you give them?
Keep going. Keep going. And it may be 1 step forward and 2 steps back, but take that step forward and then take another and then take another. Because this is the essential work. This is the essential work of building our new society. And in the bigger scheme of things, the focus might be on it, because we have to find a way that we have a process of what I will call managed constitutional transition. Those are big jawbreakers of words. That's a high level description of what we need to do. But the actual lived experience of what that means is exactly that work. It means actually taking the chance and taking the initiative to start the conversation. And then it means having the stamina and the goodwill, and sometimes the patience and the humility to actually sustain that. And that's not easy, because look, any of us, all of us, you know, let's face it, we have our moments, and we're emerging from a scenario where our island has been partitioned now for almost a century. We're coming on this centenary of partition, and real damage has been done. Like, let's not run away from that. Real damage has been done to our people. It's most evident in the north, in light of the most recent decades of conflict and all that entailed. But also in the south, a partitioned Ireland was bad for people in the south as well. So there's real damage done. But I think that rather than simply reflect on that, or give way to that or surrender to that, we need to ask ourselves, so what's the way out? And the way out of this begins, you know, with the first step, with the single step, with the first word, with the first conversation, with the first communication. And I also don't think that we should misunderstand what the outcome that we expect. Like, we do not expect, nor should we ever seek to have everybody on exactly the same page on every single issue. Nor should we imagine that we can undo all of the hurts that have been done. We can't do that. That's beyond our capacity. We can't force forgiveness, although I believe that's a good place of grace for people to be. But that's not a fair or a reasonable ask, you know, of everyone who has suffered. So we shouldn't set unrealistic, expectations for what the outcome is. The outcome is, as I said earlier, that we know each other, that we hear each other, that we acknowledge. To me, that's the most thing, that we acknowledge each other. And then I would actually like us to appreciate each other. That's where I'd like us to get to. But I do accept that it's a process. And I think it's incredible, the community work that's done, at interface areas between ex-combatants. I don't think they get nearly enough credit for the work that has been done. To my mind, some of the most innovative and actually the most courageous work has been done by former combatants. I think women have taken the lead in many communities in reaching out. And in fact, I've had the great experience of having women from Belfast visit the Dáil. A number of years, couldn't come this year because of COVID. Very much mixed politics, mixed views, mixed everything. The best of good crack, brilliant people, all of whom, when you sit down and chat things out, the differences are obvious in experience and outlook and all of that. But, don't lose the fact that lots of what we have in common. Like, we should never, ever lose sight of that truth as well.
When I introduced you, of course, I introduced the Leader of Sinn Féin, and that itself is a mammoth job. Now you find yourself as of course, you're the undisputed leader of Irish republicanism on the island of Ireland, but you're also now the undisputed leader of the opposition in the Dáil, which is an added task in all of that. And I know from very early on in encountering you that you've driven the issue of women, particularly women, and the whole issue of equality there. Are we seeing progress there, Mary Lou, or is it still a very uphill battle?
Sometimes that too can be a case of one step forward, two steps back, but I remain absolutely optimistic and hopeful, and yes, progress has been made. We're not there yet. We still have a considerable way to go in terms of equality. And when I speak as a feminist and I talk about equality for women, I say it in a spirit that the kind of equality I mean captures men as well. This is good for all of us. This is not about, only caring about women or putting women on some kind of pedestal, or much less is it about me saying poor us as women. I believe great us, brave us, strong us. So this is to get to the point of equality for women is good for all of society, for men and women, for girls and for boys. And we're talking at a time where there are still huge issues around everything from equal pay for work of equal value, which still is not a reality. Issues, as we know, around domestic and gender-based violence, issues around still the very low level of women in key roles and functions, not least in politics. That's true in Ireland. It's also true internationally. But we have real hope, real basis for optimism and hope, I think. And I mean, I'm very proud that my Leader, the deputy leader of Sinn Féin, is also a woman, and a very, very capable woman, in Michelle O'Neill, and that we have in our party in leadership a real mix and balance of women and men, of very experienced people, and then very new, up and coming youthful people who bring that incredible energy and different perspectives, and actually challenge things in a way that's really, really necessary. But I believe in, I'm an Irish Republican. I believe absolutely in equality, and I take great pride that the tradition that we serve has always recognised the issue of women and equality for women, as a centrepiece for a new Ireland and for the Irish Republic. And when you look at the proclamation of 1916, more than a century ago, and see that it addresses Irish men and Irish women, that the cause of women was very, very much, front and centre in that struggle with the suffragists and the need for, women to have the ability to vote, and of course that translates into work and, you know, access to so many things that men you know, had enjoyed. That's very significant. But it's not lost on me either that so many of the struggles across our society that are about the haves and the have-nots also hurt and affect men. So yeah, I would regard myself strongly, and I very deliberately described myself as a feminist, because I think, Joe, there was a while there that the word to describe oneself as a feminist would have been considered to be, you know, almost antagonistic, or it would have been taken as a negative. I see it very much as a positive.
If it's any consolation, the portrait of Countess Markievicz behind your head was nodding in agreement as you were saying that. So it's always a good sign.
Good.
We talked a wee bit there about, we talked a big bit about outreach and about reconciliation and about embracing old ideas and new ideas and all that. More so in the south of Ireland, but certainly to some extent in the north, we have an influx of new citizens, new Irish citizens. And occasionally when there's economic crises or social unrest, they can be the target of misinformation and misdirected racism or criticism or blame or all of that. Are you or we as Irish people, are we mindful of the danger? Do we understand it? And if we do understand it, what can we do to defend those new citizens who we welcomed, and particularly you welcomed, I have to say, when others in north and south were trying to put a hold on the numbers that were coming in?
So I think the first thing that we need to understand is that the lack of resources that citizens experience. So, for example, as you know, Joe, here in this city and across the state, we have a very severe housing crisis. And I know there are very serious housing issues in the north also. We need people to really understand that that is not the fault, and that blame is not apportioned to foreigners for that. That's just not true. It's just not true. I can tell you, see, in the city that I live in, the reason why we have a huge problem with housing has nothing got to do with new people coming to our shores, and has everything got to do with those that were in government decade after decade, generation after generation, and made decisions that favoured big developers, favoured big moneyed people, and left everybody else in the lurch. And that's what needs to change. And I understand when people are under pressure, financial pressure, when they feel they can't get the services they need, or access to housing or other essential matters, that people are going to be angry. And anger then can turn into blame. But if you are going to blame the right people. Don't blame the wrong people.
Absolutely.
And also understand that, you know, we know for sure that the most prosperous, the most dynamic economies have two things. They have equality at their heart. Equality is good for prosperity. We know this. And we also know that diversity is also good, not just for society, but it's actually a great economic driver. So new people coming to our shores will not impoverish Ireland. In fact, the contrary is the case. And I would point to our own experience as Irish people, as an immigrant nation. And I mean, let's face it, what didn't we build? I mean, we built roads, we built, you know, canals, we built, you know, bridges and big infrastructural projects. The Irish ourselves as immigrants were an economic driver. So I think it is extremely important that those kind of myths are debunked, and to ask people, you see, because people are decent. I don't believe that there is a huge, you know, group of Irish people who are, you know, inherently racist, or, you know, I don't buy that. I think we are good people. But I think we need to keep ourselves on the straight and narrow on this matter, particularly when things get tight and particularly when things get tough. And we talked, Joe, a minute ago about reconciliation and what that means and the power of conversation and knowing people. Once you know people, your Brazilian neighbor or your Polish neighbor or your Nigerian neighbor, and once you actually know people, well, then you see all of the vilification and the myths and the stereotypes, you know, bit by bit fall away, because there is one truth in life. And I know the older I get, the more sure I am of this. There's good and bad everywhere, and we're all capable of good and bad. And ultimately, as human beings, we can make a decision to support each other. We can make a decision to drive things in a way that is positive and affirmative and that actually achieves good outcomes for all of us. Or we can go down the rabbit hole of blaming the wrong people and letting the big power players off the hook and causing just conflict and tension amongst each other. So I think we should do the first thing. And I think when there's a tendency to get into that, you know, punching down, they call it, or kicking down, or whatever the correct term is, I think we need to check ourselves and come back. And elected representatives don't carry all of the burden of leadership in this, but we certainly have a role in it. So where the racist graffiti goes on the wall, or where somebody, and this has happened even in recent times, as you know, are disgracefully harassed in their homes or forced to leave their home, we have to call that out. I mean, not to call that out, it does all of us a disservice, and is dangerous. You know, it diminishes our society. So I think it's really important that people are clear-headed in that, not to lecture people or to give out or to point fingers, but to actually point to the way in which we can acknowledge the challenges that we face, the real resource issues, particularly in working class areas. I mean, I represent, as you know, Joe, some of the most deprived communities across the island. So I know all of that, and I know we need change, and I know there are people to blame for intergenerational poverty. And I can tell you, I know that those to blame are not newcomers to Ireland. They're people who have been here for a very long time, and there are people in this state who have been in government for too long of a time.
North and South, we face the uncertainty of Brexit. And it's probably mind-boggling to kind of understand or to try and work out the strategy, if there is one, of the English government and what it's trying to enforce on the island of Ireland. And I know that your friend, Rita O'Hare, has put great stock in mobilising that powerful section of Irish American as a bulwark against these proposed changes and alleged deals that will happen in the post-Brexit situation. And I recently, and I think actually the day after the American election, I seen a photograph, maybe the first congratulations to Joe Biden from yourself. And I know that through the work that Rita has done, there's a long-standing understanding of Ireland and what modern Ireland can look like. And you've mentioned economics and economic justice a few times. And I want to bring you to the document that Sinn Féin released just a while ago on economic justice. But are you hopeful that the change in American politics will stand by us? Will do, I mean, us as the Irish people will do as well. Would you be confident of that?
Yes, I'm hopeful, and yes, I'm confident. I think it is very, very significant that very senior figures in America have taken a stand to protect Irish interests, to protect Ireland, the whole island, to protect the Good Friday Agreement, and to make very, very clear to the Tory administration that any damage done, any hardening of the border, will mean that there will not be a trade agreement with the United States of America. In fact, I think when Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, Richie Neal, who, as you know, is chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and a bipartisan group visited Ireland. They came to Dublin, they went to Belfast about 18 months ago, I think. And when that statement was made so clearly, Speaker Pelosi actually addressed the Dáil, addressed the houses of the Oireachtas, and it was made very, very clear. And that stance hasn't changed, you know, and President-elect Biden has made clear what his views are. But it's equally important to say that we have bipartisan support on this issue, and I expect that will endure, and I expect that President Biden will be very clear, and I'm very confident that the position of this administration is now clearly staked out. And you know, Boris Johnson and others need to understand that that's the position. And look, what we're looking for is that international agreements, the Good Friday Agreement, the successor agreements, are respected, are protected, and are implemented. That is just how it is. And for us as a small nation, still seeking our full self-determination, dealing with the legacy of colonialism and conflict, and an island that still for now is partitioned, we have the right to expect the shelter and protection of international law, and we will not give way on that. And America understands that. And really, I mean, the Tories clearly are into now scenarios where they're announcing, almost bragging, that they're going to break international law. They really need to step back from that. And I think there are significant figures even within conservative Britain and conservative England who understand that that is a road to nowhere. In any event, they need to call that for themselves. For us, we need to be very, very sure that whatever way Brexit works out, and this is a game changer, it's not a moment in time, it's not a singular event, this changes everything in a very, very fundamental way. And it's our job in the first instance to make sure that Irish interests, and everybody, and I mean everybody who lives on this island, that we maximise the protections for everyone, for their rights, their citizens' rights, and those that carry European papers, who carry Irish passports, and those who don't, who carry British passports, who are British nationals, that we protect all of their rights, and that we protect people's jobs, and that we protect our economy and our prospects to move forward, because that's our next step, if you like, forward to a unified Ireland and a single unified economy.
We've been speaking for almost an hour, so we're almost out of time. And I want to ask you two questions, and I know before I ask them, I'm not doing you justice because I'm not giving you a whole lot of time, and each of them would be an interview on its own or a conversation on its own. It isn't that long ago that sections of the media in the south of Ireland and our political opponents in the south of Ireland were running where, you know, Sinn Féin's economic programme for slow learners, Sinn Féin don't do economics, Sinn Féin don't understand economics. Well, they're not laughing now, so for the record. But you mentioned so many times there the sense of equality and justice, the sense of choice. And of course, lots of that come from that economic ability to make those choices. The document that was released just the other day sets that out clearly. Are you confident? And I know by your look that you are confident, but are you're confident that what we economically are proposing is a game changer in terms of the quality of life on the island of Ireland, not just in the 20th, but in the island of Ireland?
I am absolutely confident. I go further. I am very sure that the ending of partition unlocks opportunities for us to get many of the things right that have been wrong for so very long. So let me give you an example briefly. Our health systems, north and south, and I know this is a matter of concern when we discuss Irish unity. People say, well, what's the health system going to look like? We have a system in the north that has been ravaged by Tory austerity. We have a system in the south that is confused. It's two-tier, it's public, it's private, it's, you know, and has been hit by austerity. We need an Irish national health system. That's what we need. We need it to be free at the point of delivery. We need it to be properly funded and properly staffed. And the only way, can I tell you, Joe, and I'm saying this without fear of contradiction, that we are getting that Irish National Health Service that we need, that all of us deserve, is in a unified Ireland. That of that there is no doubt. I'd also say the document that we produced, and myself and Michelle, along with Pierce Doherty and Conor Murphy, launched the document. I just urge people to read it. And it sets out, it doesn't set out all of the comprehensive detail of what the new economic model will look like, but it does deal with a number of issues. And it deals with the issue of some subvention, this business that, sure, we can't afford reunification. I mean, that's just rubbish, frankly. What we can't afford is continued partition. And what economists have set their mind to, and I believe there'll be more of this modelling work done, and those that have taken the time to actually project and forecast will tell you that actually reunification sets in train a real economic win in real terms, in GDP terms, in jobs terms, in income per capita terms. And that's the actual truth of it. There's no brag involved in the North, and people who advance the case of the Union saying, well, you know, we can't have unity because of the subvention. Who in the name of goodness would brag about the fact that decisions on the economy, on tax levels, the raising and varying of taxes is taken somewhere else? Why would you brag that for an economy and a system to run, that you have to be subvented from somewhere else? That to me never added up. The truth is, people in the North, like people in the South, work hard, are innovative, pay their taxes, pay their way, have every right to expect, you know, first-class public services, decent, stable employment, you know, decent wage levels. And all of that can be achieved, but it is not going to be achieved in a context where we have a fractured Ireland. So we need an economy of scale. We need to really grasp the opportunity, and what I believe would be an immense international goodwill for a reunified Ireland to actually fashion that economy. But I'd just like to, because we don't have the scope here to go into the detail of it, but I just encourage people to read that document and actually start looking at the ideas and questioning those when they say, well, we can't afford reunification, we can't afford partition. Partition has damaged our economy. It has been economically damaging in the border region in particular, but not only there, for the island as a whole.
How do people access the document? Is there an easy way to access it, or do you go to your nearest advice centre, or?
Well, I'm sure, I would hope that the advice centres have copies of it, you know, for people who want to read, you're old-fashioned like me, and you want to read it in hard copy. But equally, it's posted on the Sinn Féin website. So I just encourage people to read it. And by the way, keep an eye out for work that's being done, you know, by others, by universities, by academics, by think tanks, by different groups, community consortia, and so on, because increasingly that work is going to come on stream. And I think it's important for me to say, Joe, I mean, I'm the leader of Sinn Féin. We are the Irish Republican movement, and we are committed to Irish reunification. But I recognise that this isn't just a Sinn Féin thing. This project is a national project, and it belongs to everybody. And therefore, it is, I think, so important that activists, whether you're in Sinn Féin or not, whether you're in a political party or not, everybody who has an interest in changing, reshaping, reforming, renewing Irish society, everybody who believes in social justice, in equality, in prosperity too, and opportunity for everyone, then this is your project. This is our moment. So I would ask, even if you're not in Sinn Féin or have never been a member of Sinn Féin, have a look at this document and read and keep abreast of this story and this debate as it unfolds. Ireland's Future are doing a really effective job, I believe, on a cross-party, non-party, north-south basis in injecting a real sense of momentum and pace into this conversation. But they're not alone. There are other groups as well. So Micheál Martin tells me that now is not the time, you know, to relax, take it easy. We don't have to prepare now. The talk about a referendum on unity is premature. That's just not true. That's simply not true. It flies in the face of the winds of change that are blowing, and that will blow yet at some point at gale force. And we need to have the work done, and we need to have all of those conversations that we've talked about, that reconciliation, that connection with each other. But we also need to figure out what health looks like, what our education system looks like, and how we maximize the massive historic opportunity that is in plain sight for us now in this generation. And we need to grab that with both hands.
Absolutely. Leaving politics, if that's ever possible, aside. I don't know why you can or we can. We're approaching Christmas. It's going to be a different Christmas. It's going to be a Christmas maybe we haven't seen before. How will you spend it? What will you do? How will you relax?
The main and most important thing for me is that I can have Christmas Day with my family. So with my mother, with my, you know, I have brothers who are living outside of Ireland, and they're not coming home this Christmas. I suppose, like lots of others, they're not traveling. But we're no different from any other family. Like, you know, the cousins haven't seen each other, and everything's very disrupted, and they haven't seen their grandmother and so on. So the most important thing for me, if we get Christmas Day, if we get a good family Christmas Day, for me personally, I will be just over the moon with that. That will fill us full of joy. And this Christmas is going to be tough for lots of people. Either because they've been sick, or they've been bereaved, or because they've lost their job, and money is really, really tight. So I hope what makes this Christmas different is not simply that it's like COVID Christmas and you know, the fear of the virus. I hope that we will feel that incredible solidarity and kindness that has been the mark of our magnificent people over the last 9 months. I hope we do that with bells on for Christmas, because that'll make it really, really special.
Mary Lou, we're out of time. We've exceeded our hour, and I know that you're extremely busy. Just want to remind those who are listening that this is a joint production from Fáilte Fierce to Hear and Féil and Phobal. And can we, to you, wish you a happy Christmas. And Gordon Mila Thanks for taking the time out.
Nala Connor.